Good morning, everyone, and to our viewers. We have over 500 people signed up, so there's a lot of folks who care about this particular issue. And our issue today is affordable housing. I won't be asking about other questions. We're talking about housing today. I also appreciate we wanted to treat everybody with respect and dignity, that everybody gets a voice. We set it up in 2 different sections. I couldn't imagine doing 13 in a couple of hours and everybody getting much time to talk. So this is our second forum, same questions, same process. Residents in neighborhoods across the city are struggling with the availability and the affordability of housing. This is particularly a problem for low and moderate income families. Our goal today is to see where the candidates stand on affordable housing issues. This is being hosted by the Regional Housing Forum. This is a conversation that we have every quarter. We've been doing this since the mid-'80s. So this is where the conversation happens in the city, and we appreciate you being here in this conversation. While the issues of crime and public safety are of great importance, please note today that we'll only speak about affordable housing. Our conversations will be, I have 5 particular questions, and we'll give everyone a chance to answer, and then we'll have kind of a lightning round of yes and no, and you've got your cards there. So let me just thank our collaborators today. It really takes a village to get us to this moment in this building. I want to thank Enterprise Community Partners, HouseATL, the Transformation Alliance, Atlanta Regional Commission, where this is based, and we want to thank the Westside Future Fund. We're using their facility here today. So we really ask the housing community to help us with what are the right questions in a short amount of time. So why don't we get right to it? So we would give you a chance for, by the way of an opening statement, and we'd like for you to share with us your experience. What personal experience have you had privately or publicly in affordable housing? You have 2 minutes each, and we'll start with Ms. Dunn.
Good morning. So thank you to the Atlanta Regional Housing Forum for having this. This is amazing, and to be able to answer such important questions about housing, about affordable housing. My name is Kirsten Dunn, and when it comes to experience of housing, it's just been personal. As a single mother, and a business owner, and even starting a business from my bootstraps. I literally, instead of saying bootstraps, I should say stilettos. But starting my business from my stilettos as a single mother, I had housing challenges that happened on multiple occasions. Just 7 years ago, I was homeless with my children. So when it comes to affordable housing, I'm very passionate about it. It's a very sensitive subject. It's something that, as a leader, it is important for me as a leader of this city to unify us together, bring all of the experts as well as the community. The community has to come to the table to be able to have the conversation and say their thoughts and what they need specifically. We can't make assumptions any longer. So again, my name is Kirsten Dunn, and I'm super excited to be a part of this conversation, as well as to be considered to be the 61st mayor of Atlanta. Thank you,
Ms. Dunn. Mr. English.
Thank you for having me. My name is Nolan English. I want to say thank you to the Atlanta Housing Regional Forum, to the community partners, HouseATL, Transformation Alliance, the Westside Future Fund.
The host of them.
All of y'all. Thank you. How y'all doing? For me, the topic of home is very important. Times twice with a wife and kids. So, and all that took place here in Atlanta. I'm originally from, but I know how critical homes are. Having a house, affordable homes, is to the fabric of this city. It plays into everything from crime. If you have affordable housing, you will see a decrease in crime. It plays into our schools, which plays into our taxes, which plays into tax incentives for businesses. It plays into everything that we do. So housing is key. And pulling oneself up by bootstraps, stilettos and whatnot, we first have to assess whether someone was even given an opportunity to purchase boots. Did they inherit boots and whatnot? And how do we make those opportunities for someone to simply have boots to pull themselves up by? And that is my platform: housing, housing, housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. English. Mr. Hammad.
My name is Mark Hammad, and I would also like to thank the host. This is fantastic, and thank you for the opportunity to give the voters a chance to hear from all candidates. Myself and my fellow candidates have been to numerous forums during this campaign season, and we tend to get very myopic. Today we're at a housing forum, and we tend to focus our responses only on housing. And additionally, we are running for mayor of Atlanta, and we tend to think only within the city limits. However, when we talk about housing and affordable housing, we need to think about the region as a whole. The affordability crisis is everywhere. It goes beyond the city limits of Atlanta. When we talk about housing, we have to talk about transit. For too many low and moderate income households in the Atlanta region, they are forced to the exurbs of Atlanta. They become car-dependent supercommuters. Some of these households have transit expenses that meet or exceed their housing expenses. That's unacceptable. It's a burden that they shouldn't bear. We need to connect where people live with where they work. As mayor, I will advocate for a true expansion of the MARTA rail system to the suburbs of Atlanta. This will provide low and moderate income households access to more housing options. This will provide equitable access to job centers, and this will provide sustainable growth and development for the Atlanta region. In addition to transit, we have a huge need and backlog for affordable housing in this city. My focus is for development of vacant and underutilized land within existing high-density corridors and development within proximity to MARTA rail stations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hill.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for the opportunity for all voices to be heard in this race. My name is Kenny Hill, and I experienced the importance of housing at a very young age. I'm the eldest of 7 siblings. We're raised by a single parent. My mom in California faced housing that required us to be moved based on where our voucher would allow us to move or dictated that we live. And I remember the struggle of trying to find a neighborhood that was safe, where my responsibility to protect my brothers and sisters didn't become so stressful that I didn't want to go outside and play. As I was blessed to be able to be mentored, go to college, get a degree, and work for the Home Depot, I began to have the ability to focus on purchasing a house. And I saw what that was like, and I saw how much it went into changing my life once I was able to purchase a house. I didn't stop there, but as my career grew, I purchased multifamily property and used my multifamily property to take homeless single mothers out of shelters, to place them in my property, along with market rate tenants and Section 8 tenants, to provide true mixed income, established housing that creates a neighborhood, that creates cohesiveness. This is what we need in Atlanta. We need vision for people that will lift them out of their circumstances. There's no justice in taking somebody into affordable housing and saying, now you have affordable housing, and leaving them there. We have to provide the skills for them to get better jobs. We have to provide the incentives for them to grow a career where they can become self-sustained. People that interact with my program end up becoming a taxpayer and not just a recipient of tax benefits. That is the goal for my administration.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Ms. King.
Hello, and thank you for everyone that has helped put this forum together and for allowing all of us to have the opportunity to give our ideas. As a mother, a businesswoman, community advocate, I served on several boards that work in this area and provide stipends, and have worked to fix and figure out the challenges for affordable housing. First, as mayor, I would add a liaison in the department in my administration, because it's important to not only be the government, but also be the resource and the hub for all of the nonprofits and people that are doing the great work. So by putting all of that energy together, also it is important to have where it's not just 9 to 5. People are working 2 and 3 different jobs. It might be in the middle of the night that they have the time after they've left their second job to be able to fill out that paperwork and to look forward to that challenge. And they need a mentor, and they need someone that can walk along with them, not just answer the phone call. I think Invest Atlanta should have someone that is a customer service representative that gets them through those steps. The other thing is that we need to be where they are. Having someone go to an office and trying to figure out and navigate that system, they just don't have the time. Transportation is tough. It takes a full day sometimes to get somewhere if you have multiple stops. So we need to make sure that that transportation is easy and accessible for jobs. We need to also audit our affordable housing already as having a background in higher education. We need to assess those residents. Do they need training? Do they need education? How can we give those wraparound services to help them step into home ownership? Because it's not just about being affordable, it's about owning, creating generational wealth. Thank you.
I like a person who answers all 5 of my questions in the opening statement. I'll have a sharper point in just a moment.
Perfect.
Mr. Sears is running late. I think went to the wrong address, so we're going to move forward. Mr. Wright, thank you for being here.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for hosting this forum, to all the sponsors. My name is Richard Wright, and I want to be the next mayor of Atlanta. I moved here in 1997 with my GED, and I worked my way up to end up getting a CPA license. When I moved here in 97, my first apartment was $525. And so as we've seen, the prices have risen, and the question is what is leadership going to do to mitigate the issue? I have a comprehensive plan as mayor, and a comprehensive plan is just a aggregation of the answers to simple questions. And one of the questions is, are we going to do revitalization, or are we going to do a gentrification? And revitalization is the goal, because that's when you bring the community, the citizens, the residents to the table early in the process instead of late in the process, which has already happened. So part of my plan is to assess. Atlanta has 877 acres of land. I plan on building affordable housing on that land. I also plan on sitting down with developers and coming up with a strategy that gives a hand out. That gives a hand up, not a hand out. And so that's assessing an individual's skill set. That's offering affordable housing to college students, to students who are getting trades. And so I'm excited to be here, excited to again, tell my comprehensive plan to really mitigate gentrification and make it revitalization, and so more people can afford housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. So on to the first question. Investment in the city's infrastructure have historically contributed to wide gaps in opportunity, in wealth, in health, and certainly in one's lifestyle, leading to displacement of legacy residents. And as a city grows, that's really part of the tension that we live in. So the question, please outline your plan to prevent displacement of legacy residents and their families while ensuring investment in their communities benefit them as well as new residents. Mr. English, we'll start with you.
First of all, in preventing the displacement of legacy residents, we need to be intentional about creating a department that tends to such, an anti-displacement team built within the government, sanctioned by the city government and whatnot, that goes in, looks at the situation and assesses each one on a case-by-case basis. We first need to control gentrification. And put a stop to some of the developers, at least slow them down until we make sure we have secured our legacy residents first. With that, we need some tax solutions. We need tax solutions where we put a freeze to their taxes, number one, and then we, number two, expand their homestead exemption. to make sure they're able to stay in their homes. Our main focus of my administration would be to solidify their place in Atlanta. They helped to build Atlanta and make Atlanta what it is, and we would do them a great disservice if we allowed them to be displaced. We do need a conversation, and a conversation will be had with Atlanta Public Schools on relieving our legacy residents of the tax burden of schools. We would look to relieve them of that additional cost. I will say in addition to that, we would also have a fund set aside to help them revamp their homes. So that way, the dignity of them being there is maintained throughout the gentrification. You know, they see all this building going up around them and they can easily look less than. We want to maintain the dignity of our legacy residents. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hammad, and I'm sorry I pronounced your name wrong the first time around. I wasn't watching closely, so.
It's no problem. Everyone gets it wrong. Regarding protecting our legacy residents and the gentrification that's taking place, we have to recognize, number one, what's causing that pressure. There's an article in the AJC this past Sunday regarding this exact issue, and most housing experts and policy experts agree that this is something that we cannot prevent. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to prevent it, but we can significantly reduce it. And right now, the city is falling short of that. What's driving a lot of this pressure is the huge imbalance between supply and demand in the housing market in general. There's the demand far outstrips the supply, and we have been delinquent in bringing housing supply online, and especially affordable housing supply and where it's needed. And what that does is that's causing individuals, investors, and developers to go seek opportunities. So they're going into neighborhoods where these opportunities exist. That's causing displacement and gentrification. As part of my overall housing plan to bring on new housing units, that will reduce the pressure for investors to go to these neighborhoods. They will have other options available. So that's the first thing, is let's reduce and try to cut this pipeline off of why people are going into these neighborhoods in the first place. The second thing is we can look to existing programs. The West Side Future Fund was created to keep existing and legacy residents in place. So it's been in place for a couple of years now. We can look back. What were the goals of the program? What were the strengths? Where did it fall short? How many residents did it reach? And we can model that and go forward. We can enhance those strengths. We can work on the weaknesses, and we can expand the program. And then lastly, regarding some of these areas, the legacy residents, we need to put in place basic city services. We need to make sure that in these neighborhoods that they have clean, safe environments to be in. Just like Mr. Wright had said, we need to revitalize these neighborhoods, but not gentrify them. And I think we can do that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hill.
Thank you. I agree.
Got it.
So I agree with much of what Mr. Hammad said about gentrification is something you don't just push a button and stop. It's a market-driven phenomena that the train has kind of left the station. So what we can do is reach out to make sure that the legacy residents that are still in their communities, that want to stay, that we are able to assist them. And you have to look at it from two different ways. If they're homeowners versus if they're renters. If they're homeowners, then you can apply the tax provisions of freezing the taxes and looking at getting them some relief on the tax side. You can also, foreclosure prevention education is something that's important for those existing homeowners, because as soon as the market changes, and it always does, we see that, you know, when the economy catches a cold, these people catch pneumonia. So we need to be proactive about how do we keep them in place. If they're renters, then we need to start to build in them the fiscal and the financial acumen to be able to become homeowners. Because there are programs and nonprofits out there that can take them from renters to homeowners, and such as the Atlanta, the Land Trust and NACA. There are opportunities for us to convert people who've been proverbial renters to transitioning into homeowners. And when we do that, now we have a way to say we can keep you in place. As a renter, it's up to that landlord. If I want to sell this property, as soon as your lease is up, I'm selling it, and you can call it gentrification, you can call it whatever you want. That's the right of the landowner. So we have to be proactive about preparing people educationally and then giving them the options to become homeowners.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. And just to be clear, is that a program that the city runs or that the city would support a private sector?
The city should be partnering with those nonprofit organizations, bringing them to the table. Just like we bring the other major developers to the table, we should be first
Okay.
bringing those organizations to the table.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ms. King.
Thank you. First, I would think the tax structure needs to be totally overhauled. In a community association, you don't rely on the appraisal value of something. It's based on the square feet, so it could be a square foot tax structure. That's the other thing that on a fixed income that is stressful for a lot of residents that do own their home or receive it through inheritance to create that generational wealth. Gentrification has already started. Neighborhoods and residents have already been displaced. I think we need to reach into our neighborhood planning units, reach out to those residents. They know their neighbors. They know who's stressed. Then, as I mentioned before, in my administration, I would team those people up with a partner and look to find stipends, see what we need to do to help them and walk them through that home ownership piece. Because it's important to keep that and maintain those legacy residents there for that culture and to pass it down. You're creating, as I mentioned, generational wealth, stability. Our schools still need our tax income, but we can't be in this stress of 1 year your home is worth X and then the next year it's not worth anything. Also, working with Invest Atlanta, we should offer opportunities more so that the people can renovate as their neighborhood is renovated, that they have that opportunity as well. Then, as their property value rises, should they choose to sell the house in the future, if they're not able to maintain that loan, then it should be on the back end, where the city receives or whatever entity goes back and receives their investment or percentage. So that's a win-win for both the family and the investor that first got into that market. Definitely, we have to clean and utilize all our available resources of boarded up homes. If we have renters, we need to get them, a family, into a home immediately. That, again, creates a stable situation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sears, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Our first question was about legacy residents and their families while ensuring investments in the communities. How do we ensure legacy residents?
Well, first of all, I believe that we should start with looking at the municipal enterprise fund and how are we using that, and how can we utilize that more to create more revenue for the city. We should utilize or look inwards more than outward for our resources. A lot of times, City Council and City Hall is looking for funding from the state and from the federal government instead of utilizing their brain to come up with revenue generating enterprises. And so I've looked into a couple of them, and my administration would like to create our own affordable housing, rent-to-own options, where the city would control that through Invest Atlanta, after our investigation of Invest Atlanta. But they would then control that branch and offer affordable housing, rent-to-own options for 2 years, and then at that point, the homeowner or the renter will be able to convert over to a homeowner. In addition to that, it just begins with speaking to the residents that are already there, those legacy residents, seeing how we can help them. I believe we try to make a lot of decisions on our own opinions versus actually talking to them first, seeing what we can do to help them, and then going from there to figure out a solution. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. And just to be clear, as the leader, as the mayor, you would be the one to access all this brain power of your different departments and people and community.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Wright.
Yes, thank you for the question. Let's look at what has happened in Atlanta. In Reynoldstown, in 2010, the average price of an apartment was $700. In 2020, it's now $2,000. Reynoldstown, the average median home in 2010 was 200,000. Now it's 735,000. And so, seeing that, we know that gentrification isn't what we want to do. We want to do revitalization. And so you need to have a seat at the table a lot earlier than what the residents have. So what I want to do is my housing czar will set up a fund. We're going to issue a municipal bond to help residents stay in, legacy residents stay in their properties. We're also going to look at how we are taxing, how can we make the property tax system more fair. I think that once we do that, then we'll get a proper assessment. But the way that things are going right now, we won't really be able to save homeowners unless we act.
And the housing czar that you referenced, who's that person report to in your administration?
He's going to be reporting to me, and I'll give you an example of what the housing czar is going to work on. We need education about the home buying process. I'm a CPA, and I work with my clients, and about 5 to 6 of my clients buy homes every year. And so it's a point of they come to me, well, Richard, what do I do? Well, I explain to them, well, this is what the debt ratio is, right?
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Ms. Dunn.
Absolutely. So first, it's listening to all of the answers that are given on this panel. Just goes right back to the point that I keep driving of unity. Because even like I said last night at another forum, I'm sitting amongst geniuses that have the answers. So my leadership and focus, even when we're dealing with legacy residents, is bringing everybody together and creating a committee, a 3-part committee that's volunteer basis, that has a legacy resident that's a leader in the community to volunteer for the committee, as well as housing experts like NACA and the Land Trust, as well as even some of the people that are sitting right here. We all come together on that committee and come up with a plan to make sure that we have an immediate execution for people that are immediately being displaced, as well as a long-term plan. But putting all of our ideas together, our number one problem right now is we're divided. We have opinions everywhere. If we come together, we can solve the problems, but we have to come together. And that's what my leadership is all about. It sounds simple, and it really is. It's just about unity. We have to come together. So the first thing I would do would be to create a volunteer committee, and everybody come together to bring their opinions, bring their problems, bring their thoughts and solutions to the table. You probably already have them. We can come together and do this and be able to solve the problem where legacy residents are not being displaced.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're on to the second question. Nearly 1 in 2 low-income renter households in this city are severely housing cost burdened, meaning they spend more than 50% of their income on housing. As mayor, how would you deal with the housing needs of the most vulnerable, the low income, the unhoused, and those facing evictions? Just so you hadn't guessed who I'm starting with this time, I'm going to change it up a little bit. Ms. King, if you'll begin.
In starting with the evictions, I would reach out to the business community and ask that they hold, and/or landowners hold that eviction status, and let us work through the department that I talked about with having a liaison and look at the resources that we have. But we have to stay open more than just 9 to 5 for these people, because they're in a stressful situation and we have to be nimble to be able to answer that quickly. In terms of low income, I think again it goes back to training and education and pairing them with a mentor and/or people that we can facilitate. You're here, we're going to help subsidize this through stipends, and then we want you to be able to look and train or elevate yourself with education so that we can get you into a higher income bracket. I think we need to look around at our businesses and ask and lead by example at the city that we pay a living wage. And as we go through that process, we're going to learn more and more about what it takes to pull these people out and help, so that we're not just sitting back and letting it happen, because a foreclosure doesn't help anyone. It does not help any property owner. It doesn't help the person involved, nor the landowner that recently lost their business, even if it's the renters. And I also feel like the tax structure, again, needs to be reassessed, because that is passed on to the renter and to the homeowner. And so I feel like we need to look at our tax structure and not be in such a fluctuation with appraisals.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sears.
Yes, sir. So the question was in reference to,
How do we deal with the housing needs of the most vulnerable, the low income, the unhoused? We're really talking about at the lowest end. As mayor, how would you address those folks?
got you, okay, yeah. So I remembered you said something about 50%, and I did read something about that recently, so that was pretty surprising to see. But I believe it just starts with the resources. You know, growing up with a single mom, she used to have to drop me off, you know, at various different family members and friends' houses, and she had to work 2 jobs, and you know, that's really the story of a lot of parents, you know, still like 20 years later, right? So I believe that it really starts with providing some type of educational resources, financial literacy. And I speak from experience, you know, just last year, I had a food truck and I was doing pretty good. And I believe that it's not about how much money you have, it's about knowing what to do with it. I believe that a lot of our residents, they make okay wage, but they just don't know how to properly spend, save, invest, and direct those funds in a way that is going to benefit them in the future. So I think the city needs to, or we plan to create an entrepreneurship school, a night school where residents will be able to come and learn just those things.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Wright.
Yes, in my administration, we're going to work with P3, which is public-private partnerships, to really help renters, because we have to stratify our unsheltered from low burden, and low burden is over 50% sometimes, and when you add 20% cost, transportation cost, you get 70%, and so if something happens, then you're stressed out and you can't afford to pay something. And so what I'm planning on doing as mayor in my administration is to help fund and create a fund working with non-for-profits, working with the public corporations in Atlanta to stabilize renters over the next year, because we're still in COVID. And so I want to make sure that displacements are rampant. As for our unsheltered, I have a program called TIBS. And TIBS is transferring individuals back into society. It is a 24-month program where this winter we're going to get individuals into facilities. We're going to test mental, physical, COVID, and then we're going to set them up on trade skills for 6 months. And so at the end of that 6 months, they're going to transfer to another facility where we're going to public-private partnership with the private sector to get individuals jobs. And during that 6 months, they will have a chance to learn life skills. You know, how do you balance a checkbook? How do you open a checking account? And then in the next 12 months, we're going to move them to a facility where they start really looking towards home ownership. And so that's my TIBS program. And I'm really excited about it. I think that it's really going to transform how we handle and mitigate our unsheltered population.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Dunn.
Yes, so when you talked about the disparity of the lowest, that's even talking about homeless. So over 3,200 people, according to the AJC, is presently sheltered and unsheltered. And it starts with mental health. So even one of the things that we're already doing, my team and I, October the 13th, we start doing homeless showers in the Crossroads parking lot. And what that does is it's simply just allowing them to maintain their hygiene to start the process of wraparound services. If they show up to maintain their hygiene, we know that they're prepared to be able to receive wraparound services, to be able to start the process of giving them housing. But this is a simple start of a long-term plan. We have a long way to go when it comes to the lowest of the lowest, and that's just dealing with
So as mayor,
homeless.
you would support programs like that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Support programs like that, but not only that, also being able to make sure that the organizations that are already in place to receive federal funding to stop evictions, as well as being able to be able to fund housing, giving them the support that they need to handle the massive amount of people that they have coming through. Because right now, you call their phone, they don't answer. So being able to make sure that the city is supporting them and that they have everything they need to be able to pass the funds and allocate the funds as needed.
Very good. Thank you very much. Mr. English?
Yes, in helping the most vulnerable, we first have to acknowledge our wrongdoing as a city. We've done some horrific things to the most vulnerable people on the planet. We closed our largest homeless shelter, and we used eminent domain to do it. We left them high and dry without water for over 2 years. We pointed out the fact they had a tuberculosis outbreak, and they are right across the street from a hospital, one of the leading hospitals in the region. You know, we did a terrible disservice to our homeless population. We put them out on the streets. We had a lottery basically for vouchers, and a limited number of vouchers, and that they couldn't even use, pretty much, because homeowners don't want them, and the people that do want them, there are a waiting list, long waiting list. So we first need to acknowledge our wrongdoing and to declare a victory over veteran homelessness. Me having been a homeless veteran, me and the other veterans, we both laughed and cried, you know, because that was publicly put out to the masses. You know, let's first acknowledge our wrongdoing. The second thing is, how do we go forward from there? First of all, we need to put some preventative measures in place to help people that are going into leasing situations, giving them the right of first refusal should the owner decide to sell. A lot of times people don't understand that what they've been paying over the years, they can actually afford to buy the house that the owner is trying to sell, because you're paying a more exorbitant rate just to cover other costs, you know, where we can go in and do some preventative measures to help remedy situations like that. But I first think it starts by understanding our history, fixing that, and moving forward collaboratively. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. English. Mr. Hammad?
So with respect to the households that are rent burdened, and that is becoming a growing issue, and it's really concerning. I was born and raised in Atlanta, and Atlanta has traditionally been thought of as having affordable housing, and that's not the case anymore. So that's really concerning. We need to fight this on two ends. So first is the short term and the near term. We have existing programs for rent support, and we need to do that. We need to come in and stabilize at-risk households who are rent burdened. One of my priorities is also homelessness, and we need to cut that pipeline off into homelessness. The biggest pipeline into homelessness is eviction. So when we step up here, when we help these at-risk households, we're killing two birds with one stone. We're stabilizing these tenants, and we're also preventing more people from going into homelessness. And with these programs, it's probably not sustainable long-term to just continue to provide support to people. We have to fight this the long-term way, and the second way to fight this is with economic mobility, and that is part of my plan as well. When we talk about economic mobility, the biggest single factor in that is educational outcome and attainment. And right now, we as the city and the Atlanta Public Schools are failing. We are not providing those outcomes that lead to better socioeconomic mobility. We are not breaking those trends of generational poverty. So we need to be a better partner with APS and make sure that our students are showing up, they're showing up focused, and that when they graduate, they are college and career ready. That way they don't have to go get assistance. That way they won't be at risk for homelessness. So we really need to fight this on two ends.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hill?
Thank you. One of the first acts of my tenure as mayor would be to declare the end of the Cold War against the poor in our city. It's been ravaging. I spent the last 7 years working with the most vulnerable, taking homeless single moms and their kids off the streets and out of shelters, and providing them a pathway to sustainability. When you look at what has happened in our past, like Mr. English says, we have to, we have to acknowledge Atlanta workforce development has done a terrible injustice to those who needed training, those who were populations with AIDS, when we've had funding and we did not do anything with it. Yeah. Those things cannot happen. So when you look at the backdrop of why we are where we are, we need leadership with compassion for people who are underserved and the conviction to do the right thing. My administration will focus on giving people what they need to become higher wage earners, because there's no justice in putting somebody in affordable housing and just leaving them there for the rest of their life. They need opportunities to grow. I've done it for the last 7 years, so I know that it works. When you talk about the AHA, the Right to Work program, the voucher program, we need to audit. How many people have they really returned to work? How many people have they graduated off of the roll? I know there's a waiting list to get on it, but how many people have they graduated off of that role? We can no longer accept the status quo, and that's why we need new leadership in our city. We need leadership with the conviction to lead, but the compassion to serve those who need it.
Thank you, sir. You sound passionate, Mr. Hill.
Sorry.
All right, third question. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'd like to sit down for a couple hours with each of you individually and just talk some of these ideas out. We can't do that today, but we've got it on record, right? So there's conversations to be had. In the past year, there's been a sharp rise in home prices, as we all know. There's a 30% home ownership gap between black and white families, 30% ownership gap, which is leading contributor to the wealth gap. Having a home is one of the basic ways to build wealth. What would you do to increase affordable housing production, and promote home ownership to black households to help close the gap? Now, Mr. Wright, when your name starts with W, it always feels like you're at the end of the line, the last one that gets that. I'm beginning with you.
Yes, great question. Give you a little bit of context of that. 30% of African Americans own homes in Atlanta. White families own 60%. The median home value in a majority white neighborhood is $500,000, and in a black neighborhood is $150,000. That's a $350,000 difference, which is the largest in the country. The credit score for white Atlanteans average is 720. For African Americans, it's 560, which again is the largest in the country. And so we have to really evaluate how we're going to move forward with leadership in the city that really addresses the issues of African American home ownership. As I said, I'm a CPA, and I work with over 100, 200 clients a year, and about 10 to 15 go through the home buying process, and I walk them through the home buying process. And that's, again, explaining what the debt ratio is, how you don't need to buy a new car, and they get access to a CPA that a lot of people don't get access to. And so we need to really spread out knowledge and information about the way that we live our lives, from renters to homeowners, that I need to wait on buying a new car because I don't want to mess up my debt ratio. Maybe I need to put more into getting my education. I think that what I want to really advocate for builders to do is to do hand-ups, not handouts. And we can take and this is something that doesn't show up on a balance sheet, that when you take one of your apartment units and rent it at 60% of AMI to a young single mother, and in 2 years of her being in the trade school, now she makes enough to be able to afford the home. That's what you call a hand-up, not a handout. And that's what my administration would do.
Thank you, sir. And we'll do in reverse order. Mr. Sears.
Yes, sir. It's a good question. So to speed up the production, I'll just give you a quick backstory. So when I was homeless 2 years ago, I started looking into tiny homes, and it was really interesting what they were doing with those. However, I came across something called modular building, and what this does is exactly what you just said, speed up production. I've seen homes built in 24 hours using this technology. So it's 2021, and I believe that we should, and if given the opportunity, we will look into this technology. Pretty much, the plan is to build 15 homes per month to start out for 12 months, 8 community centers, and 6 apartment complexes using this technology. The labor would come from the community. I've interacted with approximately 1,000 homeless individuals over the last 2 months. I fed about 700 of them and housed about 40 of them. And I've met laborers, I've met carpenters, I've met plumbers, I've met doctors, all types of all walks of life. So I believe we should utilize those resources to get this project going. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. We could have built a couple of houses instead of doing this panel, maybe, huh? All right.
See the question again?
I certainly will. And we're really talking about the gap between black and white
Okay.
ownership. What would you do to increase affordable housing production? If we look over the last 12 years, there's been no production out of the Housing Authority. So as mayor, increase affordable housing production and promote home ownership in black households to close the gap.
I think, again, looking through the neighborhood planning units and also looking at our rental stock at this moment, we could work with those apartment buildings, landowners, and ask. I'm sure they don't want to have good tenants leave, yet we still need to work them toward home ownership and go through our businesses and make sure that we are working with them as well. We have major corporations here that should be also offering those services at work. Let people know about those items. The neighborhood planning unit distributes that information. I feel like our corporations and our our mayoral office should also be sending out that information if you're at work every day. It could be a job fair, home ownership fair, those opportunities there, and also what else do they need? Is it training? Is it education? It's a deeper dive than just showing up to work. And working through that to find out what else they need to be successful so that you can then pair them and do those wraparound services with a liaison and in the mayor's office.
Very good. Thank you so much. Mr. Hill.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So when you asked this question, it caused me to look back over my journey. And what happened to me coming out of poverty, first generation to get a college degree, own a home. I had to first build stability. So I had to get information. I had to understand how things worked financially. Then I was able to build generational wealth. And then seeing other people who were in my previous situation has caused me to become a compassionate capitalist. So when we talk about development and increasing affordable housing production, you have to bring developers to the table. They're not going to just sign up for free. But there are organizations like the Land Trust and NACA that we can bring to the table to make sure that what we're doing with the 877 acres that we have that are Atlanta property will be used for the best of those people who need it. The education, and then to give them the access to the loans, the foreclosure prevention training so that they're not going to lose a house after 5 years. All those things have to be thought of ahead of time as we're doing this so that we're not just putting a Band-Aid on a problem, but we're truly providing solutions that will last. Under my administration, these organizations will be at the table as we look at how we develop these 877 acres to make an impact that will last for generations in the African American neighborhood and in those who are underserved or low income.
Thanks, sir. And I was recently invited to a compassionate capitalist meeting. I don't know if you go to those, but there's actually a group that is meeting around that. Mr. Hammad.
As I said earlier, I was born and raised in the Atlanta area, and the statistic you raised is horrifying. I mean, that gap is horrifying. It's been that way my entire life. And if nothing's done, it will be that way for my son's life as he grows here in Atlanta. So I'm going to attack it 3 ways. Number 1, we have to build more housing, period. Number 2, we need education. We've all talked about it. And funding, and third thing is access to funding. So first thing, building more houses. The spike in home prices is occurring because of the imbalance between supply and demand. We need to build more supply. And right now, the scale of the problem is beyond something that the city of Atlanta can do alone. We need to go meet with our private partners, but also we need to lean on our federal partners as well. There's a good opportunity. We have 2 new senators from Georgia, and I think they'd be very receptive to assisting in kickstarting a lot of that affordable home building and providing funding for that. So we need to leverage that as much as possible to build as much housing as possible. Secondly, education. We've all talked about it. It's huge. And I look back at my journey in home buying. My parents were homeowners. So when I went to the home buying process, they've been through it. They can tell me what to look out for. I don't make those mistakes. For someone who comes from a background where they grew up in a household that's always rented, they don't know the steps to take. So that's vitally important that we have home buying education and we make sure that people are empowered. They feel empowered as they go into the process. And lastly, funding and access to financing has been a barrier for too long. Again, we need to partner with private industry to make sure that we're working with these homeowners and to close that gap, to make sure funding is not an issue, not only with the initial purchase, but also there's a rainy day fund. We can't make sure that someone hits a speed bump 2 or 3 years into home ownership and that they end up in foreclosure. We need to make sure that they can buy a home and keep a home.
Thank you, sir. Mr. English.
I was listening to Mr. Hill, and I got to reflecting on my own journey. I looked at my great-grandparents, who I got to know briefly. They did not own their homes. My grandparents, they didn't own their homes. My parents did not own their homes. And here I am about to repeat the same pattern. And in addition to a couple of bouts with homelessness. For me, I had to sit down and realize and analyze my situation and come to the understanding that I had to play a totally different game. Better yet, abandon the current game everyone else was playing, because they attempted, but they usually would pass away. I'm talking about my parents, not my great-grandparents, and my grandparents passed away before they were able to say that they were owners of that home. We inherited bills that we wound up losing the homes ourselves, through foreclosure and whatnot. So I realized, again, I had to abandon the game of just the typical route to home ownership. So I did move myself toward tiny housing. I was able to put away about $5,000, took a couple of shipping containers, had a home roughly about 12 by 24. I was able to stock away about $20,000 after training myself to receive a CDL, and after getting that CDL, which is the least amount of training for the maximum amount of pay, truthfully, I was able to improve my credit, go into a situation where I could purchase a home. And my first home I did get through NACA, and in that house we purchased it for $280, and it appraised at I think it was $395 within the first year. That's how we were able to overcome our situations, and I do believe that proof of concept will keep us going as we help others.
Thank you, sir. And I find, and I think you just exhibited, when it's a personal experience, we feel more compassionate. We work harder for it. Ms. Dunn, you shared your experience, so I'm looking at you.
So there's 2 things we have to look at here: inclusion and understanding. When it comes to the African American community, it's NPR actually just wrote an article about this, but 86% of African American people belong to a faith-based community. And so 86% of us go to a faith-based community, and customarily, we go to a faith-based community for everything. When we need counseling, when we need financial advice, so we need to, in order to reach the African-American community and be able to help break this divide, we need to focus on partnering with faith-based leaders so they can teach the African-American community what it takes to have home ownership, provide that education, and it's coming from a trusted source. So it's not just coming from, like the Atlanta Regional Housing Forum, but it's coming actually from a trusted source, from a place that they go for rejuvenation, a place that they go to worship, a place that they go, so that we go. So making sure, in order to divide that gap, we have to first understand understanding and inclusion. It's important that we go where the community is and where the community is going to receive that information, and the city needs to create a program. I don't have the name of the program yet, but we need to create a program and partner with faith-based leaders, teaching about home ownership, teaching about financial literacy, and being able to divide that gap. It's a simple solution, but it works.
Thank you very much. After 30-some years, we think the Housing Forum is church, so we just all show up and try to support each other. Okay, the next question really gets not so much to passion and experience, it gets to courage. The question that we're going to focus on now is around zoning, where the rubber hits the road, where we all feel often very emotional. The city of Atlanta is growing and attracting good jobs. Not everywhere in town, but we can see where that's happening. However, our housing supply and production lags considerably. Zoning determines how we develop our community and ultimately where we can live. The question, how do you propose adopting the city zoning regulations to accommodate these new residents while not fueling further displacement? Really getting down to the zoning that we develop and what it allows as far as we've talked about, tiny houses and manufactured houses, all that comes around zoning. So, everybody got the question? Mr. Hammad, we'll start with you.
All right, I know this is a sensitive topic. I'm going to be very blunt and clear about this. I do not support the current zoning proposal, and I'll tell you why. It's not needed in this city. The zoning proposals that have come forth, this is something that has really been a topic nationally in a lot of cities over the last couple of years. And when you look at some other cities like San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, their means of adding housing is with zoning changes. They're 100% developed. They need to add housing. They need zoning changes. When you go through Atlanta, we have so much vacant and underutilized land. We don't need to go into existing neighborhoods to rezone to provide housing. We need to put our vacant and underutilized land to use first. They're already zoned for high density development. We need to do that first before we decide to go into neighborhoods. Secondly, the second reason I don't support it, the MPUs don't support it. One of my big motivations and one of the things I'll do as mayor is listen to the community. So when you listen to these MPUs and this is something that's discussed, the MPUs don't support it. We have to balance maintaining the character and the community of some of these neighborhoods. So there is concern there from the MPUs. We need to be receptive to that, make sure we're not doing something that goes against the will of the community. And then the last thing, there are some cities that have already gone in this direction where they've said, okay, we're just getting rid of single family zoning. And there hasn't been this explosion of building. We haven't seen single family neighborhoods turn into neighborhoods full of apartments. So there's really no evidence that it hits immediately, and the jury's still out on whether it's going to work long term. But again, the scale of housing we need in the city is tens of thousands of units. So we wouldn't expect 10,000 single family homeowners to turn their houses into duplexes to accommodate that. We need high density housing and we need commercial scale housing.
Thank you, sir. We're going to go to Mr. English next.
I actually agree with Mr. Hammad with regard to zoning. We don't need to rezone to bring new housing in. We need to go and look at what we have in our hands already. that's already zoned for housing, and utilize that and push developers to utilize that area. If you're going to use anything, this is what's available to you, so that way we're not going in and create monsters where they don't need to be, and we don't leave neighborhoods without development for decades. The issue of zoning, it determines who lives where and the whole nine, but we need to be proactive in our zoning. We don't need to wait for someone to get a bright idea and decide to come to us. We need to go ahead and be proactive and have an outreach arm to the city government that goes out and looks for areas that can potentially be this, potentially be that, maybe zone it 2 different ways potentially. So that way when someone does come up with an idea, well, we've already pretty much decided we can go either way with that. And that will also cut down on the time it takes to zone when it's time to zone, because it is too often a long drawn out process, and we don't have the time to play with building the housing that we need for this city. We are so far behind the 8 ball that it's ridiculous. We cannot keep up with the amount of influx coming into the city. So we need to be proactive. We need to be expedient. We need to make things happen quickly. And again, the city, under my administration, would be more proactive. Outreach arms on every department of the city. We don't wait for you to come to us. We're already out there with boots on the ground making things happen. And I agree, the MPUs have to have input. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dunn.
So zoning makes you want to pull your hair out when you start talking about it, because the current proposal just seems very inequitable. It just does not seem like it's balanced in the approach to be able to determine the correct zoning. As a transplant myself, like 67% of Atlantans, it's important that zoning is fair. If I could say it the best way, it's important that it's fair. It's important that it is not putting anybody's property value at a disparity.
So just to be clear, you're supporting zoning in the right circumstances?
Correct.
Fair, inclusive, okay.
Correct, as long as it's fair. Because the moment that it's brought up to the point where it's in favor of one party and not the other, that's the reason the MPUs don't agree with it. So when it's in favor of one neighborhood and not in the other, it has to come to a balance. We have to be unified on the decision. And so but like I said, zoning makes you want to pull your hair out, but it's definitely something that has to be addressed. So I say that literally it needs to be addressed equitable. It has to be fair across the board, period.
Very good. Mr. Wright.
Yes, great question. Zoning in Atlanta it has been an issue and is an issue, and I think the problem is that we have a missing middle, that we don't have 12plexes that are built. We're only zoned for single housing or apartments, which turn into luxury apartments. And so what the developers have said is that, well, if you're forcing us to rent at 60% of AMI, I'll just build houses where you can't dictate who I sell to. So we need to really analyze that, and under my administration, we will look to build out the missing middle, which is 12plexes, which are duplexes, and also work with the MPUs, because I went to an MPU meeting and they were adverse to ADUs, additional dwelling units, but in a different district, they were really receptive to ADUs, which is a add-on to a single-family home, so you can have another person or a family live in the ADU. So we need to really evaluate how we're using the missing middle. And I want to go back to the last question, because I don't feel like I answered it correctly, or I answered the question. Mayor Bottoms has committed to 20,000 affordable housing units, and I'm going to continue that. And I'm going to use 2 things. We're going to use a bond release for $75 million to get Carver Home Bond Homes, the areas that the city currently owns right now, and also use what's called the National Housing Trust Fund, which is a fund that was created in 2008, and it has $679 million in it currently. in 2021. So I'm going to apply for the grant to get about 25, 30 million to make 100 million so that we can build homes. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. You got two answers in one question there. You're getting good at it, Mr. Wright. Mr. Searles.
Yes, sir. So I actually don't support the current rezoning efforts either. However, I believe that we should reserve, or I plan to introduce legislation to reserve zones for affordable housing, single family and multifamily, at least one per district. I believe that it's, like you say, it's important to look on both sides. You have your low income, and then you also have those that are middle class and upper class. And you want to be fair to both sides. And so I think to do that is just to make a minimum requirement in each district, and allow small developers, also reserve those same zones for small developers, and look at the contracts and the areas that are being awarded to developers now, because a lot of times that will tell you why certain plans are being introduced. You know, just follow the money, basically.
Thank you, sir. Ms. King.
I'm for each neighborhood planning unit deciding. I serve on a neighborhood planning unit, and the part of this that's interesting is a lot of this is tied to federal dollars, so let's move that off the table, and then talk about the character of each of the neighborhoods and the density that's already occurred. And I've not heard of a study that has shown a city that has done the density housing where it's been cheaper, and everything that I'm seeing built is luxury. And so I think spreading that throughout the city, more units throughout the city would be helpful. We have a lot of available land, a lot of boarded up homes. And so the other thing that it makes me think about when someone, okay, let's say you can afford your home, but if that's all you can afford, there's a reason that there's a grocery store called Whole Wallet. And any affordable child care, getting around, transportation. So it needs to be a fully wraparound situation, not just putting someone in a situation where maybe they won't succeed. Now they're spending all their money on something else and not able to live a daily life with necessities.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hill.
Yes, sir. So I think that there's a balance here. I don't support citywide zoning the way it's proposed, because I don't think it's needed citywide. We have plenty of land we've not built yet, and until we build that out, we shouldn't be making sweeping citywide regulations. I do support developers approaching NPUs with a plan to build density and getting the buy-in from the NPU. When people come together and talk and hear and listen to each other, that's usually a good thing. It's playing out right now where I live off of Lyndhurst Avenue in Southwest. The developer got about 11 acres, and they wanted to build a 4-story development, and the community said, no way, not a 4-story, that's too many cars, that's too much of this, that's too much of that. Well, they've come back and said, well, would you consider a cottage-style development? And then the NPU was much more favorable, so they may get that through. So I think when we just bring people to the table and talk, we can work out something that works. When you institute citywide zoning, you offend a lot of areas that don't need to be offended. The other thing is, I think we should really focus it around transit hubs. Density around transit hubs makes sense, but density miles away from transit means you're just putting more cars on the road. So we can be smart about this, and I think if we come to the table and discuss it with the NPUs involved, the developers will understand what's going to be acceptable, and there's a way to make it work. So but doing a citywide zoning, I think that's not the answer.
Thank you, sir. It reminds me, if any of us have children, you got 2 or 3 children, try to make the rule for all of them. How's that work? So, point well taken, but also a point that it is a tool that we've got to use. As difficult as it is, as much as we holler at each other at MPU meetings, we've still got to talk about that tool. All right, we're down to the last question. It's a little bit longer, so be patient. Many have said that developing city-owned land is a major step toward meeting affordable housing needs. think all of you spoke to working from our assets, right? And the city has a lot of assets. However, it's also been said that solving affordable housing is a lot of 2% solutions, meaning there's no silver bullet here. We've really got to work, and you've all been thoughtful in your answers. So that would be 50 different solutions that we might say. There are 5 different city agencies that work on housing issues, to say nothing of the nonprofit and the for-profit sector involved in housing affordability. So our question, this really gets to your philosophy as a leader. What is the responsibility of the city to coordinate efforts across public, private, and philanthropic sectors? How will you ensure there is clear leadership and a priority on affordable housing within the city? I got the question? Ms. Dunn, you look like you're ready. Ms. Dunn.
This is my entire platform.
You've been waiting for this
Unity.
question.
That's what it all comes down to. I'm pretty sure at every forum I say that word at least 20 times. It's what it really comes down to. All of the departments, all of the inner workings have to work together. And it's One Atlanta, which is what Mayor Keisha Bottoms introduced, is One Atlanta. And it comes where community and the city partner together. So what does that look like in simplicity, or how do we break that down? Every decision that's being made, it should have a city representative and a community representative always present in those decisions. And the way it happens traditionally is city council produces the law, they vote on it, then it comes to the mayor for execution. Well, it first needs to have another step. It first needs to have the step of the community. And all of the departments that you mentioned in working together, they should all have community liaisons and community representatives that are already in the communities doing the work. They're doing the work without a paycheck. They're doing the work passionately. They should have a seat at the table to be able to represent the community. And then even something as simple as an app, bringing technology where we can vote on things just with the swipe of a button, with push notifications. Hey, we're about to vote on this issue here regarding zoning, and we need you to come and say, what is your vote on it? And a vote can come through just that simple, and it be communicated then to city council, then come to where, as mayor, I can execute. But at the end of the day, it comes down to unity. We have to all come together. We have to come together. If we keep staying apart, we will get nothing done.
Thank you very much. We would all agree, and to that idea of voting, we're going to vote in just a minute on 10 questions. We won't use technology, but I'm going to go to Mr. Wright.
Working together is about better relationships, and that's what's wrong with the departments, is the relationships, and coordination starts with the leader. So again, I'm going to appoint a housing czar that will work with all 26 MPUs that are in the city to effectively coordinate what the citizens want within their districts, because right now we do top down, and that's not the way it's supposed to be. The mayor isn't Caesar and Atlanta isn't Rome. So I plan on realistically in working with the MPUs to really approach them with, well, what do you want in your community? How are you feeling about this zoning issue through the housing czar? And all other 5 departments will have to interact with the affordable housing czar. And so I'm real passionate about building relationships and with city council as well, because they play a very important piece in this as well. So that's what I want to do, again, create a housing czar.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Mr. English, I'm coming to you.
Yes, first of all, this whole situation is like a marriage between the city and its citizens. And we have to be in lockstep with one another in order to progress together as a city. So we need input from the MPUs, and we need all of the organizations, first of all, to come together as one. we need to sit down and talk before we even can approach the citizens. We can't be divided on what we're going to do. We have to have an understanding, because how can two walk together except they be agreed? In order for us to move forward together as a city, we need to abandon both of our worlds to come together to create one new world. And that's going to take us having a dialogue, some tough, heated fellowship, the whole nine, in order to come to an agreement. And if we're not in agreement, something like Cop City, an issue that's come up lately, if we're not in agreement, it may be the right thing, but it's the wrong time. And the right thing at the wrong time is the wrong thing. We have to move forward together as a city. And, you know, I come from a teaching that says that, we all know it, the blind lead the blind. The blind leading the blind, they both fall into a ditch, which one presupposes that leadership can be blind, number one. And with that, we have to look at our approach toward that blindness. Are we willfully blind, apathetic in our thinking? I don't know, and I don't want to know, and I don't care. Or are we understanding that all of us have blind spots? Every last one of us, every entity has a blind spot. Every MPU, every citizen has a blind spot. When we do all, just like Kirsten said, when we all come together, we're able to eliminate those blind spots. And we're able to walk together because we all see in part, we move in part, but everyone coming together, we get the full vision of the picture. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're using that metaphor for marriage. It's getting all the love we wanted in NPU meeting.
Right.
Is that, that's
much
where
love.
we're going? All right. Mr. Sears.
Yes, sir. So, like the other candidates said, you know, it really does boil down to unification. But I think more so than anything with leadership, it comes down to having an open mind. Whoever's at the top has to really have to been through a lot of the experiences that people are presenting. A lot of times when you have a decision to make and you haven't actually been through that situation, it causes a disconnect between the decision that you're going to make. The next thing would be, my administration plans to create about 15 boards and committees, that one of which will be called the Affordable Housing Inclusion Board, and it'll be composed of about 15 to 20 individuals, unsheltered, the community leaders, small business owners, and nonprofit founders. And they will be tasked with the oversight of affordable housing in the city. They will be coming up with the deadlines, the timelines, and ensuring that we're actually making progress, because right now no one is being held accountable. As you can see in front of City Hall, people sleep out there all day long, and they just walk over them. And you know, no matter how much money we're given, it's always distributed to United Way or to, you know, this nonprofit, that nonprofit. But why not sit down with your council and come up with a plan that the city can initiate, rather than putting the blame or the responsibility on an organization? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hammad.
You asked, what is the responsibility of leadership with regard to housing? And there's one word that comes to mind for me: accountability. And that's it. If I'm elected mayor, I have a sense of urgency. I'm in office for 4 years, and that's it. The buck stops with me. So we can talk about partnerships, and we can talk about our federal partners, we can talk about the nonprofits, but the failure to build housing and affordable housing, that's on me. If I'm mayor, I'll take full responsibility for it. I have a sense of urgency for this. So my responsibility as a leader, I'm going to use my relationship capital. I have no problem using it. I'm in office for 4 years. I have no problem leaning on a developer a little bit, ethically, of course, but I have no problem doing that. I have no problem going to our partners in Washington and leaning on our senators, leaning on our congressmen to get funding, to get attention for this. That is my responsibility of leadership. Secondly, we need to make sure our citizens have safe and dignified housing. We've all seen the stories about the Forest Cove apartments, and that is just a complete and utter failure of leadership. It's finger pointing all over the place. Our city council members have been hands off about it. Our mayor's been hands off about it. They're pointing to our federal partners in HUD about it, and no one's stepping up. And we have individuals and children living in undignified, unsafe, decrepit conditions. That needs to stop. As mayor, that is my responsibility. I will not allow that to happen. That is our responsibility of leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Hammad. Ms. King.
I figured out the pattern.
I'm going to change it again, so
Yes,
go ahead.
that's okay. I think the city should be the hub. As I mentioned, having a liaison between and among the nonprofit, providing those resources. You do have to work and help each person or entity come to the table. The business community, the nonprofits. Technology is desperately needed at the city, and it would help those departments for that interconnectivity and find out whom is working on what, because I think that's a lot of the problem in terms of our budget. I've spoken to city employees that the technology is there, but our budget has not allowed the additional step or the additional access to find that. Having lobbied Congress on behalf of the Fraternity and Sorority Pact to end hazing, I would also lobby Congress to open up 401ks and make sure that there's not penalty driven, and also that you do not have to start in the foreclosure process to be able to access those funds if they're needed, especially in this tight job market. So definitely the city needs to be that hub of resources and work with all the spokes to create that wheel. Thank you.
Thank you. Didn't think we'd ever get to you, Mr. Hill. You're up.
Thank you. So as the mayor, I like the way Mark said it, the buck stops with me for execution, especially around affordable housing. It's something I've lived the last 7 years. I understand the importance of it, but I would have a chief housing officer, because all of these agencies need to have a central point, and that chief housing officer will have somebody who has the ear for the community. Effective leadership has to have an ear to hear, and when the community is heard on a consistent basis, we can develop trust. And I think right now, trust is a key piece that's missing from a lot of what's going on. So we have to earn that trust of the community that we're going to do the right things, we're going to do it the right way, and then as we earn trust, we can really begin to become unified. I love Kirsten's constant reminder that we need unity, but it's not going to happen where there's no trust. We can't move any faster than the speed of trust, and my administration will earn the trust of the community as we move to do things ethically and expeditiously to address the affordable housing issue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hill. So we're going to move on to this low-tech way of voting up or down thing, because I'm going to ask you. Everybody's got their yes is green, no is red. Everybody ready? These are not questions we gave you before, so you have to think fast on this. Do you support changing the zoning ordinance? And I'm not asking about the one we have, so listen to me. Do you support changing the zoning ordinance to allow more density in missing middle housing? All right, so we have one no with Ms. King, and everybody else voted yes. Our second question. If elected mayor, would you adopt and build on the existing One Atlanta housing plan created in 2019, which aligned with the HouseATL recommendations? All right, I think we're unanimous yes. We would all support that plan. Third question, will affordable housing around transit and the Beltline be a priority for you? We all talked about where the low-hanging fruit is. There's land there. We all voted yes on that. Atlanta Council members Westmoreland, Dickens, Brown, and 7 others introduced an ordinance to City Council this past Monday to propose a general budget allocation of 2% phased in over 3 years for a new housing trust fund. The question, would you support this or other ideas for a dedicated source of funding? All right, everybody is in support of that idea. Do you believe that the City of Atlanta should increase the number of permanent supportive housing units across the city? A number of you spoke to this earlier. Supportive housing units. All right, you all voted yes. If elected mayor, will you participate in the Atlanta Regional Commission or the mayor's, MAMA, those kind of coordinated bodies to talk about affordable housing in the region and how we work with each other? All right, you all voted yes. We'll see you at an ARC meeting coming up. Housing advocates are encouraging the execution of a second half of a $100 million bond. Are you committed to this? Again, this is dedicated money for affordable housing. All right, you all voted yes on that. 95% of renters have no legal representation when they're facing eviction. This is very alive for us as we speak, whereas landlords always have an attorney there. Will you increase access to legal counsel as an effective way to increase stability to renters? All right, we're all in support of that idea, that we have our representatives at the table as we're negotiating. Well, thank you for that part of it. We're down to the end. I would ask each candidate for your closing remarks. Do we have 1 minute on this? We'll have 1 minute, and note that we'll share your campaign websites to all our listeners, and we're going to be sending something out to them later. So this is your last comments, your closing comments. Mr. Hill, we'll start in the middle here, and we'll work each way.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to come and share today. I've given my story. I've talked about my passion for helping those who are disenfranchised in our city to help make up for some of the wrongs that have been done. Atlanta needs a new kind of mayor, one who puts people over profits, one who has the conviction to lead, but the compassion to serve every citizen. I am that kind of leader. I'm not talking about things that I will do. I'm comfortably talking about things I have done and things I'll continue to do as a private citizen. That's the mark that we need to look for in leadership. Anybody can make campaign promises, introduce bills during an election year, but what are you doing every day, every week of every year to impact this city? So I appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward to serving as a 61st mayor of this great city.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Ms. King?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to address a dire situation in Atlanta. These are challenging times, and I look forward to tackling rising crime, homelessness, and to rejuvenate the spirit of Atlanta. As others have mentioned, we can come together. It takes leadership, a fresh voice, and many different ideas. So I'm looking forward to meeting you, and I will look forward to being your next mayor.
Thank you, Ms. King. Mr. Hammad?
Thanks again to you and all the partners who came together to host this. I hope you found value in it. I hope those watching and streaming found value in what we were able to provide. I do want to commend my fellow candidates here. The passion, dedication, and enthusiasm that they bring is laudable. The amazing thing is we all come from different backgrounds, and we've all had different personal life experiences, but we all have the same goals, and I think that's amazing. No one wants to see crime. No one wants to see poverty. No one wants to see our fellow citizens struggling with rent and rent burdens. The next mayor has a large task ahead of them with respect to a lot of things, but especially housing. It's a top issue this year. So I hope whoever is elected the next mayor will be able to take some of the passion and ideas that have been presented today and incorporate them and help the citizens of Atlanta.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hammad. Mr. Sears?
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for, first of all, allowing me to slide in.
Well, you get best dressed today, too. So.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Like I said, actually, coming from a single mom, my dad, he took flight, but, being incarcerated, being homeless, being fired from multiple jobs, and just turning that around to being an author and a nonprofit founder, a business owner, and a community advocate. It turns things into perspective for me, and I hope it does for a lot of young individuals, to let them know that no matter what you're doing now today, you could always be something better tomorrow. So I really am appreciative of this opportunity to be here. And like I always say, no matter the results of this campaign, I'm a person, not a politician. So thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Sears. Mr. English.
First of all, Bill, I want to thank you for making this painless. You've been great, and I want to thank George and the team behind the scenes, George for playing bad cop so you could play good cop. So, again, I think, just like Mr. Ahmad said, if you look at the people at the table, you have people that are ready to fight for Atlanta as opposed to fighting over Atlanta. And I think leadership coming together is key for the city being unified. It's going to take every last one of us that calls Atlanta home in order for Atlanta to be truly what she was intended to be. And that's going to be with us, first of all, coming together despite this election and the whole nine. We have to come together as a city, period. Housing plays into everything, and we have to be united in what we do. This is Atlanta United, and we're asking everyone to get in the game. You can check me out at nolanenglish.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. English. Mr. Wright.
I thank everyone for attending. I thank the Atlanta Regional Housing Forum for hosting this. To give you a stat, so I'm a CPA, I give you a stat. 20% of the benefits of gentrification go to, 73% of the benefits of gentrification goes to the top 20%, and 15% go to the top 1%. And so we have to really look and analyze, and how can we make gentrification more equitable and more inclusive, and that's through revitalization. And I feel that I'm a CPA, and I have the financial acumen and the dexterity to really sit down to talk with stakeholders that are dealing with the affordable housing crisis. And so I look forward to serving everyone. And as the next mayor, you can go to my website, www.wrightforatl.com. I'd love to hear from everyone. And again, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Dunn.
I get to go last on this one.
You do.
So thank you for hosting this. This was incredibly painless. Like he said, this was actually enjoyable. Housing is so important. And I am so grateful for the opportunity to even bring the topic of unity up every time we sit down. If that's the core purpose of being able to serve this city, is we have to come together. We have to come together in order for problems to be solved. We have to. Our number one problem in Atlanta right now is we're divided. So One Atlanta is community and city partnering together. My name is Kirsten Dunn, and that is what my leadership represents. It represents community and city partnering together. So let's get it done with Dunn.
Hear, hear. Let me thank each of you. The Regional Housing Forum, through the years, has really tried to be inclusive in the same way that we've tried to be inclusive today. While I couldn't imagine having 13 people at one time, everybody got asked the same question. Everybody got the same amount of time to answer it. And that's because your voice is important. And I would say to the hundreds of people that are listening to us out there, and we know this through the forum and through the years, that the community voice is absolutely important. And that trust is the only way that we build back a democracy. And working collaboratively is the only way that we get it done. And having the passion that each of you have exhibited, and the folks that were before you, that it really does take passion, and I would say courage, to be a public servant today, to go through this many forums that you go through and showing up around town. And that one of you, or one of the people that we interviewed today, will be the next mayor. But all of you are leaders. And we're going to depend all of you. You all live here. I know where you live now, and I've got your contact information. So we will be in touch. And to say that the folks, we did have some technical problems, I think, earlier on. All of this is being recorded. You can find it at the ARC website, and you can find it at the Atlanta Civic Circle website. So it'll be a clear recording. You can hear everybody's position. Finally, I would say that all of us, whether we're parents or an MPU chair or whether we're the mayor of Atlanta, has to deal with competing demands on our time, on our attention, on our positions today. That there's no real neutral ground, we have to take that position. So that's our commitment at the Regional Housing Forum, that we continue the conversation, that we continue to listen to the voices, that we look at the best practices, that we really try to live out the value of collaboration. So I'll see everybody in our next housing forum. Go to the website to listen to it, and thank you again for all being here. God bless.